So welcome, Alex. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us. Why don't we start by you giving us a little bit of an intro to yourself and to Vulog?
Sure. I'm Alex Thibault. I'm Vice President General Manager for Vulog for North America. For those of you that don't know what Vulog is, Vulog is the world's leading SaaS-based platform to power new mobility services. So what we have is we have a complete technology stack that is end-to-end to enable anyone who would want to launch a new mobility service, whether that's car sharing, moped sharing, van sharing, trucks, or kick scooters. And you're able, within a couple of months, to have a full technology stack unrolled, and you're able to launch a project with anywhere from a couple hundred vehicles to a couple thousand vehicles relatively easily. What's particularly, I guess, interesting in the things that we've done is that the experience that Vulog has is really with large projects. You and I have these conversations once in a while, but the projects that we work on are, from on one side, you've got companies that want to launch relatively small, pilots with 100, 200 cars. And you've got companies that are building large business lines around new mobility and just trying to do all kinds of different things. And, we can work with one or we can work with the other, and we roll out these projects pretty much worldwide.
So that's sort of the main reason I'm so excited to talk to you about this stuff today, right? That breadth of experience is really important. And we're doing this nowadays we need to do this. It's April 17th, 2020, right? So if anybody's looking back at this, we're in the middle of the interesting sort of pandemic times. And so
I'm sure
a lot
people
of us
will remember.
they might, but actually the actual date is kind of important because I think this is the point, right? It's changing so quickly, and all of us, whether it's personal or commercial or, business life, we're sort of trying to work out what's going on and what is this a new normal. And so I think for you and I, you alluded to it, right? We talk to each other quite a lot already about business. We work in mobility, which is an industry that in and of itself changes rapidly. And so, but I think you're uniquely positioned, right, to speak about the change because you've built a business around the change. And so let's get to sort of the pandemic situation, kind of what we think that means. But maybe before we launch there, tell me a little bit more about your customers. And, in many of these cases, there's always a decision, right, as a vendor of sorts for the customer. Do they build it themselves or do they go to somebody else?
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about that kind of process for your customers and how that looks.
Sure.
We're in the mobility space.
Sure. Our customer is really, it's one of a number of companies. We work with well-funded startups that want to launch something at a decent scale and then grow it very aggressively. That's a part of our business for sure. But a very fast growing part of our business in the last, I'd say 12 to 24 months has been automotive OEMs. We work with 6 OEMs in the industry and when we say work with OEMs, we don't mean we're doing pilots with OEMs. We mean we're running large projects in multiple cities with multiple hundred vehicles. For us, that's a definition of working with an OEM. Different people, what stage of growth they are, they have different definitions of that term. But we've been working with OEMs for a long time, and it's interesting because the pandemic. Whether it's for OEMs, and I mentioned OEMs and startups, but there's a number of companies in between. We work with insurance companies, with car rental. We work with oil and gas companies. We work with a couple of straight up vehicle fleet managers. All of these companies are looking at ways that their business is going to evolve, obviously in the situation we're in right now and post-COVID as well. And it's been interesting. And I will say this. COVID has had an impact on our business, but it's had a much bigger impact on their business in the short term, obviously, because, you know, people aren't moving the same way that they moved before. And they certainly will not, at least it's our hypothesis, is they will not move the same way after, right? And again, you know, you can think of the different forces that are at play here with how people are going to be moving out and about. On one side, you've got the economic forces, right? People aren't sure if they'll still have a job. They don't necessarily know whether or not they're going to have their lease payments that they're going to be able to make on their cars. So obviously, you don't know if the first thing that they do when they get out of their house is going to be rushed to a dealership. Very well might, because of the other force that's at play here, is maybe they're not going to want to be on transit anymore or as much. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So maybe that way of for them to have the mindset is maybe you don't want to be on transit. So you might take shared mobility if you can be alone in a car, or, you know, alone on a moped, or use a bicycle more. Right. So you've got the economic side, and you've got the sort of I don't want to get sick side that are going to kind of play off each other. So we will have a better idea of as these things play out. And I mean, we have our thought, and the data seems to indicate that in the places where things are still up and running, there still is quite a bit of demand for mobility. So that's great news. Now, to come back to your question, which I took a long way around to get back to it, a lot of these companies that are large and that either put a small toe in new mobility or just, you know, threw themselves in the deep end, they have different rules that they're gonna have to abide by in this new world, right? Developing a technology stack internally is very expensive. And frankly, because of the COVID situation, you don't know what type of mobility is going to end up working super well down the road. So for that reason, it makes all the sense in the world to come to a company like us, where we have one platform that does one of 10 different business lines, and you're able relatively easily to switch from one to the other. And, you know, just repackage an app and just be able to switch going from free floating instant access to round trip scheduled based or things like that. So developing in-house actually doesn't make all that much sense. And that's to start with the premise that we don't even know that companies are going to have cash on hand to invest. So the CapEx to launch a service when you launch with a company like us is much lower, obviously, because you don't need to develop a system from scratch. And so you put that with the uncertainty of not knowing what's going to end up working for you in post-COVID world, then things make a lot more sense to work with a company like us.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say it, actually. So, you know, little bit of a plug for Trōv. Obviously we work on the insurance side, and often Vulog and Trōv works together actually to solve these solutions for the same customer. You know, we're like yourselves and your business, and we're based around technology, working with insurance. And so our programs have always been built for new businesses that are scaling, right? So they have this inherent volatility. But as we sit here, and it just makes me think, volatility is almost the key word, right?
Right.
Or agility, maybe in response to volatility. So it is, so, you know, hopefully that bodes well for both of us as businesses, that we offer that agility.
Now, have you found that on your model, on your business model, the volatility has been a good thing?
Well, in the sense that as we sit here, and we're really having having a conversation around what's in front of us, given the craziness of the last 90 days. We're already doing this in context of being in mobility, which is an evolving space, right? So our model was built on mobility is changing. We don't know what direction it's going to go. We want to give our customers the control and the agility to move left or move right as necessary. I suppose that's even more heightened today, right, in the situation of the pandemic. But I'm going to parlay this into a tough question for you. We're all trying to work out where we're headed from here. You know, can you give us a prediction? Are you willing to give a prediction? Like, you know, you're sitting there knowing what you know. What's in front of us here in the next 3 to 6 to 12 months? I don't know.
Right. Well, I can tell you one thing. I can tell you that we will most likely have a very good idea in the next month, and I would say maybe month to 6 next weeks. For one reason, it's that we have services that are running in China. So when things pick back up on the new mobility side everywhere throughout China, it's going to give us a relatively good idea as to what is really going to happen in terms of new mobility, right? So unfortunately, the services that we have now are still not running. So I don't have much to say, nor would I really go into the data because it's all confidential client stuff. But it would give us a good idea as to how we can help, or at least how we can anticipate things would start up again. That being said, I'm not much of a gambler with regards to predictions, but I will say one thing: it's going to be different everywhere. And we're already seeing it be different pretty much everywhere, because surprisingly enough, we have some cities that are up on usage. We have some customers that are doing well throughout this situation, simply because they have different use cases than some other places, where those use cases, like, for example, people going to work systematically, taking that or transit. Well, if no one goes to work, of course, you don't have those trips anymore. Yeah. But for places where people use it for different things, like delivering stuff, or like going on a weekend trip to go hiking somewhere where there's no travel restriction in your local area, well, you could still have those trips happening at a relatively high frequency. So it's been interesting to see how things shake out. And I will say this too: there's a number of operators around the world who have been extremely proactive in the current situation. So that have aligned their business, whether it's for healthcare professionals or again for deliveries or things like that, in order to go where the need was in this particular time. And I'll add a last point, kind of in closing, I guess. A lot of operators have taken the side of let's go after and let's build a relationship that's going to be core with the city that we're in. It's both a marketing thing as well as this is kind of the right thing to do, right? And building that relationship with the city and supporting the city where we are is just a smart play in this day and age with what's happening right now. And services are increasingly becoming and being recognized as part of the fabric of a city, especially when you're dropping number of hundreds of vehicles or even thousands of vehicles on a city. You're part of the inner fabric of the city. So you're becoming like an essential service, just like a bus service would be. So investing in the relationship with both the city officials, as well as the people that are the citizens in that city, doesn't seem to be a bad bet in any way that you shake it down.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing something similar. So in absolute terms, we have seen a few customers dial down to zero.
Right.
And of course, we know this, like, this, because we're both businesses powered by the data, right? So we're powering insurance in our case by data. But we've seen exactly what you've seen, in the sense that some of our customers are even more vital, actually. And you use the term sort of essential businesses. Some of them have been defined as essential businesses. In our case, generally, because people are moving from transit. So we talked a little bit about the future, but it's also worth maybe stating that I think in both our cases, demand has not gone to zero across the board, right? It's not completely everything is done as a business. People still need to get around. Their preferred mode of transport probably has changed a little bit depending on their own unique situation. But there still remains opportunity from a business sense. And
tremendous opportunity, right?
Yeah. And even maybe from a human sense, we're seeing some of our customers do some really interesting things, and it's quite widespread, which is nice, right? There's particular folks who need access and should be getting priority access to these things. So from my perspective, kind of to answer my own question about the prediction, I'm going to punt on it like you. I'm going to say, I'm not going to predict. But what I will say is, Similarly, things have not gone to zero. And like you said, things will change. We're already seeing this change. I mean, the hope in the longer run is there's some really great silver linings from this, not just from a commercial sense, but also from a sort of human societal perspective. My hope is maybe there's more sharing going on, but we'll see what happens with that. So with that said, Alex, appreciate the time. Very insightful. I'll remind people, because we didn't quite predict, but times are changing. It's April 17th, 2020. But appreciate you taking time out on this Friday to share your opinions.
Looking forward next time.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.